thank you all for coming. Hopefully, I'll try to keep my volume up. If you need it up a little bit, just give me something, and I'll try to speak a little more loudly. Yeah, today talk on this interesting subject matter. I guess, am I the only one that didn't know that the KKK was organized in Wallowa County? Basically in that time frame, 1920-25 was when they were here. A couple things just in terms of the big picture. Wallowa County wasn't unique in that there were, during this time period, the Ku Klux Klan was all over Oregon. Astoria, LeGrand, Pendleton, Baker, etc. Basically every county had a chapter of the Ku Klux Klan during this time period. And so if we were thinking about the Ku Klux Klan, 3 periods right after the Civil War, U.S. Grant shut that down, and then they were the second resurgence in 2025 that we're talking about is part 2 of the Klan, and we'll talk about the why of it. Why did it rise again? You can read a million dissertations and theses on why it happened. I don't really have a good answer for you, so what I've chosen to do is just throw a bunch of stuff up here, and you can think about it yourself. And then the third and final one, of course, was right during the Civil Rights Movement in the beginning of the 60s and that third wave of the KKK. But we'll be focusing on this 1920-25 as it applied to sort of Oregon and Wallowa County specifically. And I've got to figure out the tech here. So the first that we hear about the KKK in Wallowa County is right here at this time in the fall of 22. And the local paper, they start mentioning the KKK as organizing in the state. And what you'll see here, which I think is interesting, is that they note in the paper, the Wallowa County Enterprise Record Chieftain, that the Willamette Valley is all in an uproar over this. It's dividing families. People are either for the Klan or against the Klan. And we should know right off the get-go that the Klan was controversial. There were some people very much for it, some people not for it. It never was either one way or the other in Oregon. It was always controversial. But here, the paper comments, makes a few comments in 22, and that's the first we hear of it. And then the first real thing that happens here is that this Elizabeth Chauvin comes and speaks in Enterprise. And she comes in November 22, and she was working in St. Providence in Portland, Catholic hospital, and she quit, and she went around speaking for the Klan at this time against the Catholic Church and against Catholicism in general and for the Klan. And so she showed up in Enterprise as the first sort of kickoff to the KKK in Wallowa County in November of 1922. I gotta keep remembering which way to look.
Was there a Catholic church in the county at the time?
There was a Catholic church in Wallowa at least, and Mary Ann probably knows better than I do. At least, pardon?
It's on where the truck route is.
Yes. Did Enterprise in the 20s? I think they did have a Catholic church in the 20s.
1910, about 1910.
About 1910. And then, so as part of that, as part of what the Klan was doing in the second resurgence of the Klan was, if you think about, and we'll get into this a little bit more about the time period following World War I, part of the issue that brought the Klan back up into resurgence was fear of Catholics. The immigrants that were coming in were mostly non-English speaking, and they were mostly Catholic. So there was a worry across the U.S. that the Pope was going to direct the votes of the incoming immigrants and the Catholics. And so one of the first things that the KKK did nationally, but specifically in Oregon, was sponsor this bill to make it illegal to have parochial schools or religious schools, that you could only have public schools. And so this particular bill, when it came up, it first appeared that it passed in Wallowa County by 19 votes, but after they brought in the precinct results from Grouse and Troy, it was enough to tip it the other way, so that they did not actually vote to disallow religious schools or parochial schools or Catholic schools. And so eventually in 24 it was ruled unconstitutional anyway. But it was a very close vote, 50, by my count, 53 votes.
Dave, what are we looking at in this photo? Can you confirm?
This is an old version of that's the Enterprise High School in the background and a version of the grade school in the foreground.
Wow.
And then the next confirmation that we have that the Klan is in Wallowa County and is organized is basically, some of you may have seen this book around. It's called Inside the Clavern, and it's a really kind of a spectacular book in the fact that it's one of the few existing continuous minute meeting notes of any clavern in the country. So the backstory was one of the LeGrand attorneys and also a state rep, Colin Everhard, was in the Klan over there, and one of his lawyers, after his death, threw it in a safe, and it was in the safe for, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years. When he died, they found him and said, oh, look at this. We've got all these Klan notes. So they published these. And of course, well, Union County and Wallowa County fairly tied together. And so a lot of the minute notes are contained, for happenings in Wallowa County, are contained in those notes. And this is the first from December of 23. And we could say that they were organized because we know that they mention in LeGrand the visiting Klansman, our Mayor Robinson of Lostine. And he had just recently moved to Lostine and was running the drugstore. Younger guy in his 30s. And then Courtney, and that could be one of numerous Courtneys in the Lostine, Evans area.
David,
Yeah.
is that readily available, that reference?
The book, yeah, yep, it is eBay or,
Okay.
I think Kathy at Book Talk has a copy. It's really interesting reading. But that's actually an older shot. That's taken in 1902, not the 20s of Lostine there. And then the next thing that we see is that the Klan paper for Oregon, which was called the Western American, published this ad, and you'll see here at the bottom, we've got Elgin, or Lostine, Elgin, Enterprise, LeGrand, Baker, regionally. So they're pretty well organized, and they've taken out an ad in the Klan newspaper, which was published initially out of Portland, beginning in about 1922. And they've got, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but some of the tenets of what they're looking for in their membership. That's just another shot of Lostine, taken about roughly that time period. But backing it out to the larger picture, the Klan first started organizing in Oregon in 21, and you can see here by August, the word had kind of spread. They started down in Medford and Grants Pass and started organizing down there. And a couple of the guys who were organizing down there, their targets really were the city councils, the ministers, and the police force. So they would go, and the fraternal organizations like Knights of Pythias and Oddfellows and Masons, particularly Masons, and organizing that way, and starting to develop their Klan claverns, as they call them. And this is the first notice we have locally in 21 of that larger, in the Wallowa Sun, of the larger Oregon organizing that was going on. And from there, spread quickly up to Portland, and they really got, by August of 21, they've got a pretty sizable membership in Portland. And what you're looking at there from the Portland Telegram in August is some of the city council members, including the mayor and the police chief. And then a little bit later that year, in the fall, they've organized another rally in Portland at one of the big auditoriums, which is escaping my memory right now, but with a bunch of the ministers invited to their sort of kickoff organizing efforts. Two of the guys most responsible for getting it up and running in Oregon are these two guys, Frederick Gifford and Luther Powell. One of them was the Kleagle and the Grand Dragon, and the Kleagle sort of the organizing guy on a regional scale, and then Gifford was just for Oregon. And in Portland, the way they started kicking it off, and this became a very common technique, would be to show a couple movies, and they could be. We're just at that I forgot when talkies come in, but we're right at that moment when sound starts to come in, and so here they're showing the face at your window, and the Portland Daily Journal describes it as. What will happen if the seed of evil and discord and pernicious foreign doctrines are allowed to take root in America? So you come watch the movies, and then you get a speech, and in this case, almost all of the speakers for the Klan at this point, and they had a name, I'm forgetting, they have an official name, it starts with a K, can't think of it. But, so they were basically paid lecturers, and I think 90-some-odd% of them were Protestant ministers. So you get the speech from the minister on the tenets of the Klan and watch the movies. And so, taking it back just a hair, so we can take a look at where we've got a census of the county in 1920. And we can see in Oregon, it's 95. This was one of the reasons the Klan said, oh, that's a pretty good place to start organizing. And 95% white. Of those 95% white folks, 85% of them are native born. In other words, they're born in Oregon or they were born in the United States. And it's almost predominantly Protestant. Not a very big Catholic population, and not very many foreign born. You can see in 1920 where we were at in Wallowa County, we were up there pushing 10,000. And you can see Enterprise, pretty sizable little town even then at 1895, and then so on, Joseph Enterprise lost speed. And then, again, if we were diving in, if we had more time, we'd look at it a little closer, but if we were diving into it just at sort of a service level, in Wallowa County, that's, in that census, that's 96% native born in the U.S. or in Oregon. That's 99.8% white, and that includes in that bunch is 437 total in the county foreign-born whites. So that might be a German speaker. What we did have in the county was 17 non-whites at that time. We had 11 Chinese. The majority of them were in Wallowa, a few in Joseph and a few in Enterprise, and we had 6 Indians. You might think, well, were those Nez Perce or some of our local native folk? They were not. They were implants from Minnesota, Kansas, and elsewhere. And in the case of those 6 Indians, they were single women, one widowed, one divorced, with children. And one of the interesting things for the poor census takers is at this time when race and eugenics were such a big deal is to figure out, are they white or what are they? For instance, the Basque sheep herders in the county, you will see in the census, well, they originally probably wrote white. They scratched, or they wrote something, they scratch it out, and then they write white. And the same thing was true of the Chinese children, because we had biracial Chinese white children in Wallowa here in 1920, and again, they were scratching their head about, are these white children, or are these Chinese children? So they would scratch it out, and almost every case, write white. Yes.
Regarding that high percentage of native born, it seems at that period of time, there would have been a large percent of them, their parents or grandparents would have been immigrants.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there may be no data on that, but
that's right.
it now we're several generations further along, but at that time.
Yep. If you looked from 1900 to 1920, you would see exactly what you're talking about, a much greater percentage of foreign-born folk here that had a direct connection with the old country from wherever. Yeah, totally true. Yeah. So it gives you a little bit of a picture of, Wallowa County, not that much different in 1920 than it is now, perhaps. Pretty simple. And so backing it up even further to get a little bit of a bigger picture about the reorganization of the Klan, and this is the guy that got it all up and going, and you've probably heard of Stone Mountain, Georgia, fairly famous. That's where they kicked it off, and they didn't do it willy-nilly. They did it organized, and they had a plan. Yeah, I like this little quote he throws out there. He says, because what they did is they went on top of Stone Mountain, Georgia, they lit a cross, they had a ceremony, and so they had a whole production up there. And he said of that event, and this is the pamphlet that he initially put out to restart the Klan, this minister, Reverend William Simmons, and he said, the angels have anxiously watched the Reformation from its beginnings, must have hovered about Stone Mountain and shouted hosannas to the highest heavens. So he felt pretty strongly about it. And in conjunction with that event on Stone Mountain in Georgia, they coordinated with the release of the movie Birth of a Nation. And you've probably either maybe run across this or heard about this famous American movie. It was basically the Jaws or the Star Wars of its time. It was the biggest movie. It was seen by so many people across the country. But what they did in Atlanta to reorganize the Klan is they advertised the ceremony on Stone Mountain and the movie back to back in the paper so that you could go to one and the other. And prior to and after the movie, they had parades up and down near the movie theater, and that's how they sort of got the KKK up and running part 2 at that time. That's just a still from the movie, and if you haven't watched it, it's 3.5 hours long. It's a silent movie. It's a pretty impressive thing to watch. And it basically tells the story. Thomas Dixon wrote it in 1902 and became a runaway national bestseller. And it's basically the story of how the South, the Ku Klux Klan, saved the South from rapacious black men overrunning the country and raping all the women. So he wrote it, and he's got a little quote up there that he said in the Saturday Evening Post in 1905. No amount of any kind, industrial, classical, or religious, can make can make a Negro a white man, or bridge the chasm of centuries which separate him from the white man in the evolution of human nature. So old Thomas Dixon had particular views about race. He wrote these, there was actually a trilogy of these books, but it was the birth of this one, which he had originally published as The Klansman, that got made into Birth of a Nation. And so the Atlanta paper, one of the Atlanta papers following, I just threw this up because I thought it's hilarious to me. After the movie, this is the review and the newspaper account of the debut of the movie in Atlanta. The headline there, Birth of a Nation sweeps big audience like a tidal wave. And when it was over, they weren't raging with hate, but were sweetened with a pure understanding. And then the article goes on to say, the story of creation was told in 8 words. But should the pen of another Moses be raised today, he would need 10 times that number of pages to do credit to Birth of a Nation. There has been nothing to equal it, nothing. Not as a motion picture, nor as a play, nor a book does it come to you, but as the soul and spirit and flesh of the heart of your country's history, ripped from the past and brought quivering with all human motions before your eyes. It swept the audience at the Atlanta Theater Monday night like a tidal wave. Pretty high praise, I would say. And so the first movie shown at the White House was Birth of a Nation. If you know anything about Woodrow Wilson, kind of a mixed bag maybe as a president. But one of the things he did as part of his presidency was try to desegregate the federal bureaucracy. So to separate white, black folks working in his administration. And they showed Birth of a Nation. And they actually quoted him quite a bit. I mean, it was one of the stills from the movie where they quote his thoughts on it. He was a big fan of the movie, and felt like it was an accurate representation of what had happened post-Civil War, that the Ku Klux Klan had actually saved the South from black people taking over and causing a bunch of trouble. And now switching a little bit ahead into time, here we are back in Enterprise in 1917, and this is, of course, we're in Wallowa County, so it takes a minute for a movie to get here. But they showed it, this opera house, which is long since gone, would be on the south, excuse me, on the east corner of the courthouse, gone now. And they showed it there in August of 1917. And it brought more people in than any movie that they'd ever shown previous. And they estimated, they showed it for 2 days over the weekend, and they showed it to over 1,000 people. So, you're talking about 10,000 people in the county, quite a few of those spread out, but at least 1,000 of them come in and watched Birth of a Nation at the Opera House.
What year was it shown at the Opera House?
1917. And then, of course, right after 1917, something really dramatic happens, and that's World War I. And so we get folks all over the county, of course, heading off to World War I. And there's a lot of volunteering and a lot of people signing up, and away they went. And so they're packing out of here on the trains and leaving for the war by that spring, by late April of 1917. That's a shot at the courthouse of some of the Enterprise guys headed out. This guy, interesting character, I don't know. I think those names are known. But on the home front, following that, looking at sort of what was going on in the local scene, and I don't think it was that much different than the national scene or what was happening in Oregon, but when we look at some of these things during that time period of World War I, one of the things that's interesting, we see these stories appear in the local papers about traitors showing up in the county that are amongst us, that are here, that we have to be careful. This particular case, and this guy here, the paper kind of tries to push back on the rumors against him, and he writes a letter to the paper and he says, "Hey, I'm not a German spy, I'm not a traitor. I did not disrespect the American flag. Neither have I worn a German uniform on the streets of Enterprise. Neither do I train my children to be disloyal to the United States." So he's trying to push back on this idea that he's a German traitor. But you get this anxiety going on here locally about who's a loyal citizen and who's not. And then you have these other anxieties. If you've heard of the International Workers of the World Labor Organization, one of the things that starts to come out, especially in the Pacific Northwest papers, is this idea that the IWW is out starting fires, burning crops, burning mills. They're up to all kinds of anti-American activities. And so there was a lot of anxiety around that. And again, this is just in the summer of 17. And then we see locally that they start to organize local military companies to protect each town. It wasn't just Enterprise, Joseph Wallowa, and Lost Team all looked into, and some of them did a better job than others, of organizing these little military companies to protect the towns against these foreign infiltrators or rabble-rousers or whoever it might be, just because of the heightened anxiety that they were feeling. And again, another example of where an IWW guy was in the county trying to organize. At that time, we had the Bowman Hicks Mill and the East Oregon Lumber Company up in Enterprise and some others. But those are the two main ones. And some of the IWW organizers were coming into the logging camps and trying to sign up for people's for membership. And here in Wallowa County, they just grabbed them up and rescued them and put them on the next train out of town. And a couple little blurbs on that. And then as a counter to that, what they did is the United States, because of the importance of Oregon and Washington's timber for boats and for planes, they actually formed a government union called the Loyal Legion of Lumbermen and Loggers. And so basically in Wallowa County, if you didn't join that, you were going to get fired from either the Bowman Hicks or the Nibley or the East Oregon Lumber Company. So of course you can imagine most of those folks did sign up, and they organized here at that time in around 1918. That's a shot of the Enterprise Mill. And then another example, sort of the anxiety, is out on Zumwalt. There are a couple of Swedish brothers living out there, young bachelors. They each had homesteads. They kind of stuck to themselves. They didn't buy Liberty bonds. They didn't go to the parades. They didn't seem to be taking a part in civic activities. So the folks out at Zumwalt, according to the paper, about 100 men and women went out there and told them to get out of the county. And they did. They loaded them up on the train and they shipped them on out of here. But you'll notice the loyal citizens expel slackers. That could be anyone who wasn't living up to sort of a patriotic sensibility that they felt necessary at the time.
Is it known whether they lost their property or what happened?
You know, I haven't followed up on that. I'd be very curious to find out. I do know that they hadn't proven up yet. So they hadn't spent the necessary time to, but what they did say,
The county.
pardon?
They lived in the county then.
They're there. And I know that one of the things they accused them of was they had originally got homesteads and then they sold those, and so they were kind of flipping. And so that made people a little bit upset that they were, yeah. The other thing that was sort of perplexing and disturbing was, of course, the Spanish flu. And so, just like everywhere else, it hit here. And so, you know, in 1918, they shut the whole county down. And that wasn't, as you can imagine, very popular. It spread that the public gatherings were forbidden. And you can see there, the headline there, spread all over the county. And actually, surprisingly, they arrested the directors of the Lost Team School for a time period for allowing the school to stay open. So they drug them into jail. I don't think they were in jail very long, but they were in jail for a time period because they had kept school open. And I think one of the things that's really worth thinking about is the horrificness of World War I. You know, this is the first industrial war, and I don't think you can underestimate how terrible it was. First of all, you were set in a trench day after day after day. And you know, a lot of these kids that grew up in these rural spaces had this really romantic notion of warriors. When they got transferred to Europe and they were fighting trench warfare with gas bombs, for the first time some of the most terrible conditions, it really caused a lot of psychic, traumatic PTSD type of things. And the thing was, a lot of these guys were surviving for the first time with these unbelievable wounds because they were starting to develop plastic surgery and making a little progress in medicine. So a lot of them came home with unbelievable deformities and wounds. So as an example, these guys here, friends, they had went out together, they split up, and this one guy from Wallowa there, he says, while advancing across the field in the Battle of Argonne, James Dale recognized the body of a soldier he happened to pass as that of his friend Peter Bew. And Bew's used to have, I think, Marianne, a place kind of out in the Whiskey Creek area out that way, Leap area. It's hard to appreciate what a shock that must have been to Mr. Dale to come upon his comrade and not to be able to stop and lend what assistance he might be able in case his friend were wounded. So it would be amazing that they actually got split up and were in different companies. They did make it back to the same battle, and there as he's running across the field, he sees another person from Wallowa County there apparently dying on the battlefield. And then when these young men start to come back to at the close of World War I, one of the things that happens is they immediately start organizing the American Legion. And so in Wallowa County's case, that's the Chief Joseph Post number 18. And they start up a little bit earlier than this in 1919, organizing here for the Legion. This strikes me as absolutely incredible. As part of what they were doing, the Legion was doing at that time, is they wrote a weekly column in both the Joseph Herald and in the Enterprise Record Chieftain. And this, I don't know who the writer of this was, but evidently they took turns writing the editorials. And this one struck me as really amazing. It says, Chief Joseph Post has the most unique name of any post so far organized. The post is named for the noblest American of them all. As chief of the great Nez Perce tribe of original Aborigines, he stood for 100% Americanism. He fought for his country to the last, but was far more honorable on the battlefield than the hunt. Interesting how we can use history, sort of where or however we like. I wonder what Chief Joseph would have thought. And another bit from their columns of this notion of slackers and this idea of 100% Americanism. So what they came back with, and you can imagine, these young men went out to this horrific battle. They came home, and already they're sort of in this odd state, I think, and they see a lot of hypocrisy in their local society. And through the American Legion, they start doing a little expressing their opinion and flexing a little muscle. But one of their biggest things is this notion of 100% of Americanism. They don't want to put up with any slackers. They want people that are for the country. You can see there, they say one of the editorials says, the day of reckoning for pseudo-Americans, near Americans, or little Americans in public life approaches the dawn. Right at the same time, something locally, regionally happens. And if Jennifer gives us here, she spoke on this incident in Centralia, Washington, where there she is. Jennifer knows more about this than I do. I'm not going into it too much. But basically, 6 people died in this labor riot in Centralia, Washington. IWW members and American Legion members. And the IWW secretary was captured, beaten, and hung. They also castrated. Pretty serious business. So the local post, they wrote up long columns. They were of course furious because I believe the 6 or the 5 that were killed were all American Legion members, I think. So a lot of bad blood at that time over labor riots. And then again, a little bit more about IWW. One day at the Hotel McCrae here in town, IWW organizer shows up and goes into the barbershop and tells the barber that he's an IWW guy. And the barber calls the deputy sheriff and they arrest him and fine him and put him in jail for a bit and then ship him out of town. And then this notion of Americanization, it really takes off. And it's not just locally, this is also a national thing, but here we can see it played out in Wallowa County really starkly through the high schools and through women's clubs and through fraternal organizations. And so this idea of Americanization is that we need to be teaching our young people and the immigrants how to be proper Americans, because they don't know. And so we need to spend time. So there was a lot of concern. This Entre Nous club means, it's French for between us. They got a bit in here about speaking on, she read her paper on what is Americanism, what is it? And then a high school student, a minister spoke to the high school students about Americanism. Women's club here in Wallowa, same thing, and then one in Enterprise. These are literally all through the papers during this time period, this concern. And then the American Legion, right about this time, developed a whole list of resolutions that they publish in the Wallowa County papers. It's quite a long list of things that they want to see changed in the county and what needs to happen. One of the big things that they were really adamant about is this idea that the kids should be taught patriotism in school and what they called, again, 100% Americanism. And they said that if any teacher is not teaching at least 7 minutes of patriotic curriculum during the day, that they should lose their license. That's a shot at some lost teens. Really happy lost teens. And this is an example from that time, 1921. This is the Wallowa High School newspaper. This student won an award in the county for writing this paper called The Melting Pot. And I think it kind of encapsulates some of the anxiety and worry about immigrants at this time. So it says, one thing about the foreign immigrant is that they come from a country whose standard of living is far below that of the U.S. The immigrants live for far less than Native Americans can live on decently. They're clannish and they stay by themselves. They have no idea of what democracy and self-government mean, and many of them have no intention of staying here permanently, but plan to go back after a few years and live at ease the rest of their days. And then spreading it out and going back a little bit in time, like regionally for us, here we are regionally in the 4 counties, Umatilla, Union, Baker, Wallowa. The first that we hear about the Klan is this in January of 22. And again, you can see it follows the same pattern of we have a minister speaking on the tenets of the Klan, and those 2 movies again are being shown in Pendleton in 22. And then the first we hear about it in LeGrand is that the local Methodists are having a meeting, a public meeting, to discuss the Klan and kind of weigh the pros and cons of it, how they feel about it. And you can see there at the bottom it says, in light of the fact that the Ku Klux organizers are reported to have spent several days in LeGrand last week, the topic is preeminently timely. So this is just on the beginning here in 22, early February 22, of the Klan organizing in Union County.
So were those folks concerned about that then?
Well, again, no community was ever, probably the biggest Klan cities, the most uniform were Astoria and Albany, Grants Pass, Medford. Most of the other communities were kind of split. For instance, the editor of the LeGrand Observer, Bruce Dennis at the time, was very anti-Klan. But you might find another, like Cheney up at Enterprise, not so anti-Klan. He's a little on the fence, but he wasn't too overly concerned. So, yeah, I think it was basically a divided populace.
The nightshirt Klan, that's a reference to the sheep.
It is, yeah, funny little. Yeah. And then here we have, again, the same pattern is followed. Minister shows up, that's Dr. R.H. Sawyer, and he was actually the official ministerial lecturer for the Klan in Oregon. So he spoke in many, many places all over the state, and in this case, at the Star Theater in LeGrand. And again, you can see he's leaning back into this notion. The paper says that he stressed what he termed 100% Americanism and launched an attack on the Catholic religion as well as all foreign people of America. So again, feeding back into those already existing currents that we see elsewhere. And then here's Baker. This is again, she is going to leave here and go speak in Enterprise. So this is the same ex-nun that is now denouncing the Catholic Church, and she tells these really kind of horrific stories about what the Catholic Church is up to and what the priests and the nuns are up to. And actually, the Portland paper from Providence Hospital puts together 60 non-Catholic physicians who refute her accusations. But she travels all over Oregon, and here she is in Baker in 22 speaking again. This is, as far as I know, this is the only existing photograph of a Klan parade in Northeast Oregon. And this is, you could probably recognize the Elgin Hotel or Opera House, is that the Opera House? Opera House in the background. Looks like probably the beginning of the parade. And this one, this photograph does not go with that, I apologize. But this parade, this was just a notice that in November of 22, a cross had been burned on the hillside outside of Oregon. This was probably taken a little bit later, would be my guess. But they're kind of lined up and parading.
Have you thought at all about?
Were your Catholic family members in Elgin at that time?
I did have, yes, yeah. Yeah. In fact, my grandmother told me that they had a little Virgin Mary on the dashboard, and or my mother told me that they would hide it.
I was just curious about that little shed that they were dragging down the road.
That's a really good question. You know what I think it is? I think they're, I think they're doing one or two things. I think they're either emphasizing the school piece of it or the homesteading piece of it. I'm not sure which. I did ponder that myself, what they're up to there, why that is. And then you've probably heard of Walter Pierce. If you're over at EOU, the library, of course, is Pierce Library. Well, Walter Pierce he's from Eastern Oregon. He's from LeGrand. And so in that race, that gubernatorial race, in that fall of 22, he won, but he won basically by supporting the Klan. He was pretty cagey about it. Yeah. It's debated to this day whether he was actually a member of the LeGrand Klan or not. But it's clear that he attended at least 2 meetings, and it's clear that he attended at least 1 meeting in Enterprise. Was he a member? It doesn't probably matter, but the thing that pushed him over probably was he supported the anti-Catholic school. He supported the bill to ban Catholic schools in Oregon.
And David, that bill was actually against all private schools.
All private.
But it was aimed at the Catholics, of course.
Primarily, but right.
But it just blanket outlawed private schools in Oregon.
Yes, which brings up a tricky point, because one of the organizers for the Klan in Oregon had children in a military school in Oregon, which was a private school. So he got a bunch of flack for that, right? But you can see in Wallowa County, Pierce pulls it out. I forgot my notes exactly how many, does it say in there? Well, it does. It says 587 to 1344. So did pretty well, looks like.
Recently, the library at Eastern was the Pierce Library.
Oh boy, yes. So we do have this. Right, just a little sidebar.
I'm sorry, David.
No, that's a good sidebar. He does. This is a personal letter from the Kleedrath, the secretary of the LeGrand Klan, to Walter. It's pretty clear that they're pretty chummy from the verbiage in that. And then, they debated back and forth at the EOU what to do, because Pierce's wife was also one of the state librarians. So they were, Pierce library there. Maybe we could just have it be for his wife instead of for him. And eventually, I think eventually they did. Looks like they renamed it. I've been in there a couple times, but I haven't noticed what it says above the door, I guess. Does it? Doesn't say Pierce. And then jumping up to 23, so this is when the kind of Klan really settles into Wallowa County. And here we see Klan burning, cross burning down Wallowa. That's the old creamery, which I think Marianne might be down on the far end of Main Street.
Right.
Frick's Bakery, is it down that way?
Well, Frick's Bakery is up by the school.
Up by the school. The creamery.
Across the street from the Methodist, the old Methodist church.
Okay.
And there's nothing there now.
It's just a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, just a lot.
So here they threw up a cross up on the hillside. You can see that, and then on the 24th they'd done it again at Lost Key.
You know why they targeted the place by the creamery?
Yes.
Frick's Bakery, they were Catholic, but why target the creamery?
I don't know the creamery. I didn't look into that. Do you know, Marianne?
What's that?
Why maybe it was by the creamery? If they were foreign-born folks.
I don't know, but it's by the cement bridge is still there.
Right there.
And it was beside that,
Yeah.
I suspect the other one was up across from Frick's because the Frick's were German. And also the Christian church minister was quite involved.
Yes.
Well, in LeGrand, they were after a German Catholic butcher. Tried to chase him out of town.
Yeah, I think that appears in some of the notes, yeah.
So I think that probably, if anybody was a
Yeah,
Catholic,
for sure, yeah. Or just a foreign-born immigrant, period. And here, then here we see, right shortly after that, January, or before that, January of 23, the Enterprise Klan puts this first ad in the paper. And you can see there's some interesting stuff, what they say in there. If you're a native-born American citizen and believe in this, which they say are the tenets of the Christian religion, white supremacy, protection of pure womanhood, I'm not sure what that is. Just laws and liberty, closer relationships of pure Americanism, the upholding of the Constitution of the United States, the sovereignty of our states' rights, the separation of church and state, freedom of speech and press, closer relationship between capital and American labor. Think again to the LLL, the Loyal Legion of Lumbermen and Loggers, preventing the causes of mob violence and lynching. They really highlight that, right? And there's some studies that have been shown that during the second in the South, during the second resurgence, lynching actually went down. The second, because this was a business Klan, the second owner of the Klan, Wesley Evans, he bought the Klan, and he worked hard to change the viewpoint that the Klan was violent. So they really emphasized that piece of it. And then preventing unwarranted strikes by foreign labor agitators, prevention of fires and destruction of property by lawless elements, the limitation of foreign immigration, the much needed local reforms, and law and order in general. So that's kind of their platform.
So David, there were representatives in Enterprise and Augustine listed there, right?
Yeah.
But there was never an official Clavern here, as I read.
Yeah, Enterprise is the only one that got the necessary membership to get an official charter.
Oh, they did get a charter?
Yes, the Enterprise did.
Okay,
But I suspect that had members from all over the county.
yeah.
And since that was the county seat, that's where it made sense. Yeah. And so if you showed some interest in the Klan, then they're an organized outfit. They had a whole bunch of forms, just like many of the fraternal organizations. You had to fill out this paperwork, sign it, send it in, someone looked it over, and then they called you in for a secondary interview. But some of the questions, what's your occupation, what's your politics, what's your religious faith, what fraternal member, orders are you a member? Do you honestly believe in the practice of real fraternity? So just stuff like that. Do you believe in pure Americanism? So they want to make sure, they want to vet you and make sure you're right. And then in Enterprise, I apologize, it's not the People's Theater, which is long since gone in Enterprise. It's an earlier shot was okay. But again, here's where we have the first speech by a Christian minister coming up to speak. And as Marianne pointed out, this is the minister from the Christian church in Enterprise, James Pointer. Shortly after this, about half a year, he would leave and go down to the valley and be replaced by another man who was also a Klan supporter with the Christian church, but in Enterprise. But he comes and speaks, and this was, sold out. The theater was packed at the time, and again, we're in 1923. And then we get into this question about, well, wait a minute. 1923, what else was going on in 1923 that was fairly significant in Wallowa County? Well, they had two big mills in this county running, an Enterprise and Joseph and others. But the two biggies were the Bowman Hicks and the East Oregon Lumber Company. And the Bowman Hicks brought in black loggers. Oh boy. Right during the height of the Ku Klux Klan. And so there needs to probably be a lot more study and thought about this. If Gwen was here, she might be able to weigh into this much more than I can. But the idea was that the Bowman Hicks folks said, to avoid all this labor nonsense, let's just bring in our folks from the South, black folks, up into a white community, and they'll be way less likely to strike if they're out, clear out at Maxville, 20 miles north of Wallowa, than they would be otherwise if they were in Enterprise. Probably a good bet. And so here again, at the same time period, what we've got is those black folks are coming in here, they're organizing that Maxville segregated town out there, logging town. And the IWW, there's a strike all across the Pacific Northwest. They call it off, and everybody goes back to work right at this time period. And another thing to consider is how frequent, you could probably count through and sound how many folks are in blackface in this masquerade, but it was a very common social event to have masquerade parties in Wallowa County, and folks would almost inevitably dress up in blackface in these masquerade parties. The other, of course, let's see, did I throw that up there? Nope, I didn't. Is the minstrel shows. So there were professional minstrel shows where they would bring in a troupe that was either there were white people that were in blackface performing comedic and musical acts, or they would have actual black folks come in and perform, or they would have the high schools perform minstrel shows, or the fraternal clubs would perform these regularly. So like during this time period in the paper, there is a minstrel show, I swear to you, like every 2 weeks. It was a really popular form of entertainment where white folks would go watch white folks dressed up as black people pretending to be black people. But here, this is a little different version with the blackface masquerade on Enterprise. Here's just an assortment of 23 of just crosses being burned around here in Wallowa, Enterprise, Enterprise Wallowa. And you can see in there mention of Klan speakers coming, the Reverend Cookingham from Pendleton on his way. And this is coming right out of this book in the meeting notes, and you can kind of, I just picked a few that kind of point these out. Some of the things, like there's a boy there who, a boy from Lost Teen. This young man down here is fairly interesting. The Kleegraf, which was the secretary for the Enterprise Clan, this guy's name is Clarice Bailey. He had moved here from the valley, young man, and he homesteaded out by OK Gulch as you're heading out to Zumwalt, and spent, he spent probably 15 years here, or 10 years. But he was the local secretary for the KKK and Enterprise.
Hey, David, so how did somebody own it?
What's that? Oh, the original guy that organized the KKK organized it as a corporation, as a business. Because what they realized was he first started it as a fraternal club with membership dues, wasn't getting anywhere at all. So what he did was he hired 2 Atlanta publicists to come help him figure out how to make it go. And what they did is they developed a pyramid scheme. So if I get you as a member, I get a portion of that membership fee. So once they did that, it spread like wildfire. So the second guy, they wanted to depose the first guy because they weren't agreeing with his ideas, and so he actually bought him out. And that's when it really took off, and they started selling all those memberships and making a little money on the side. So you can make a lot of money.
So is that how the federal government were ultimately able to bankrupt that organization?
Oh my gosh, there's lots of little, yes, that's part of it. And also, just some very shady shenanigans going on in a lot of the different, at the national scene and at the state organization level. Fraud and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, in that Indiana Klan, he said that the membership dues were $10, but the Stevenson got $6 if every camp.
Right,
And then he got the money for the uniforms
yeah,
too.
that's
So he
exactly
was
right. That's right.
fabulously well.
That's exactly right. So you couldn't just buy, you couldn't make your own hood and stuff. You had to buy one. So all that was a money stream for those guys. It was basically about, it was about the money. This is gonna be the first big KKK show in the county. And it's at the end of the 1923 fair in Wallowa County.
Wow.
And they're all excited about it. And Saturday it starts raining. And it rains, and it rains. And by Saturday night it's snowing. And so the whole fairgrounds is nothing but a mucky mess. And so you can see these guys, they're gonna start their parade in Enterprise downtown and in these white sheets, and they are gonna go to, and so they cancel it. And they also cancel the next days of the fair, the following Sunday, have to hand out rain checks. So we don't hear anything about this event, other than they had it planned and it doesn't go anywhere because of the weather. And this is just a smattering of where we see the Klan would show up at churches, usually in their hoods, sometimes without, or sometimes they would take them off. They would usually sing a hymn, they may say a little something, but they would give donations, public donations during the service to the ministers.
Wow.
And so this is examples of where that's happened in Joseph Enterprise in Wallowa, where they show up and say, here's, however much money, and then go on their way. To sort of garner public support and show that they're, good neighbors and, decent community members. And then this is where the Enterprise in 24, they get enough membership. According to the rules, you have to have 1,000 members, but there's no way that Enterprise has 1,000 members. At this time, it's probably a couple hundred, but they did get their charter and were up and running at that time by February of 24. And then we just have these through the rest of 24. We have these just events where they're parading around. They're fairly showy. With the crosses and the robes, and a lot of times they would have lighted crosses, electrically lighted crosses, and almost always accompanied by burn the cross on the hill. Here's one from Enterprise parade that happened in February 24. With members from, the Grand Baker Union, elsewhere coming. And then another, some of the another speakings that happened began in 24. This Reverend Allison, escaping where he's from, but he spends his time in the paper railing against fake news. Really talking about that. And putting out the idea that the papers are not capturing the true spirit of the Klan and giving false information. So he's working against that. Yeah.
What was the false information? What were they saying that upset him?
At least in Oregon, what I've read is, you have just these communities that were divided, and you have folks that, like some of the editors, who are anti-Klan, so they write fairly anti-Klan editorials like, it's discrimination to not have, if you want a Catholic church or school, have a Catholic school. We shouldn't, just pushing back on a lot of the tenets of the Klan, and particularly against, I think personally, against the secrecy. Although the second version of the Klan was less secret, they still were wearing their hoods, but there's something anti-American about kind of going undercover under a hood, in my estimation. But I don't know if that answered your question, but there was a whole host of things I think that they would push back against.
Well, that's good. I wasn't getting that flavor that there was pushback. That's all kind of part of the normal way things work.
Well, the Klan was definitely trying to normalize the Klan and make it more family friendly. Because at this time they had the Klan Kleagle kitties, they had the Klan women, And so they had a whole bunch of different organizations. They sponsored carnivals and swap meets and every kind of Ferris wheels and all of it. So they did try to make it more like a fraternal organization and more family friendly. So to somehow marry some that together.
And they were against, they were promoting separation of church and state, correct? Is that what you said?
But you can see there might be a little contradiction in that idea.
Why are the ministers giving the talks and what are they preaching if it's anti-religion or against separation of church and state? Why are preachers giving talks and all these things?
Because I think that Protestantism, being a Protestant is true Americanism. That's truly American. Protestants are American, Catholics are foreign influence because the Pope is up here and he can tell you vote for whoever, and en masse you should vote for whoever the Pope tells you. Very un-American. So I think in that regard, and other ways as well, but just that America's a Protestant country.
Yeah. Is there any way to trace how many Catholics there were in Wallowa County in the 20s?
Not that I know of, because it doesn't show up in the census. And so it's really tricky information to wrap your heads around, besides the diocese histories. And so if someone was really wanting to dive into those and try to dig through, you probably could. Baker City has a really good record of their diocese.
Okay.
I suspect LeGrand does, but that's one of those, wow, you're really diving in now, buddy. But would be interesting to know, because we don't know.
Well, Baker had, wasn't there?
Sizable, very sizable Catholic population.
Yeah.
Yes, yep. Again, 24, some more, again, a little bit of this, and now you see 16 new members in March, and 11 of those were women. And then down at this is I'm not sure when this photograph was taken, but that's the old Wallowa gym, I think, Marianne.
Yes.
And so they had a parade down here, and somehow they went ahead and commandeered the gym, so they must have had some connection with the school, I'm guessing, because they had a public initiation, or they had a meeting in the gym. They probably just rented it, I would imagine. And here you can see in that April 24, estimated between 80 and 100 men were present from Enterprise and Lost Team down here for the doings. And then this is another ad, and you kind of get again the tenets here. Tenets of the Christian religion, maintenance of white supremacy, pure womanhood, laws and liberty for all, closer relationship with pure Americanism. Again, more of that same sort of idea of where they stand. And of course, at the bottom, law and order. They were big into that notion of law and order, that this was prohibition time, and that they would help the local police force deal with prohibition.
Is there any record of conflict with Maxville?
No. No, this is a really curious bit of it, and I think just more study needs to be done. There's a couple little ghostly little things. In Mark Harberger's book, he mentions that in a later interview, and I think in 1976, one of the people that lived out there said that the Klan showed up out there, and the town boss, the logging boss, booted them out.
Okay. I've heard that as well.
But other than that, you don't get it much, and so it's really curious what was going on there. Another Klan parade, this time 39 road mass figures paraded through Wallowa. Some of them were ladies.
Well, that's great.
Some of them didn't wear their hoods. And then again, 24, nearly 100 folks parading in Enterprise in May. And then they held a large initiation that night.
At the KKK Hall, it says.
Yeah,
Where
well,
was that? Do we know?
I think the KKK Hall was the Masons.
Was where?
The Masons.
Okay.
Yes, that could be. There was another hall that was established that they were renting because they didn't have their own. They may have been an odd house. Yeah. And then I'm going to leave it here because I'm running long. But this is really the last that we hear of the Klan in about October of 1924 in Wallowa County. It's almost as if they disappeared. We see them lingering on in LeGrand and Baker and Elgin, but here, poof, they just sort of fade away. None of the papers, in any of the papers I've been able to see, you see anything about any other Klan activity past this date in Wallowa County. The thing that I think is particularly entertaining or interesting is that this was their big deal. This was at the end of the Wallowa County Fair on the Saturday night, after the Buck and Broncos and all that had been done. They were having a public ceremony to initiate over 100 new members in enterprise at the fairgrounds. And so they did do it. And this one is described fairly well. They all roll up there, they have this thing, but at the same time in 24, they've also encouraged the Native Americans to come up and perform at the fair. Those two, I wonder, again, what they would have thought about all that. Anyway, so that's pretty quick. And again, I don't think there's any great answers. My approach more was just to sort of throw out there sort of the general scene and then think about it from there.
David, quick question. Are most of those photographs in the Heiberger book? You sourced them? Or?
Some of them are, yes. Yeah. Some of them are in there.
What were your other sources?
Oh boy, the Wallowa History Center collection, the Wallowa County Museum collection, and others, and folks, yeah, Bruce.
I just can't help but see a lot of similarities in your presentation to the current political climate, and I just wondered if the timing had anything to do with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm probably with you. There's a lot of anxiety, and to be straightforward, there's a lot of division between people that love each other, that have widely divergent opinions on what's the best way to go here. And if you look at that time, what you see is all this uncertainty. Like if you think about Wallowa County at that time and the nation at that time, radios, cars. So you're going from this one way of life that's quickly, clearly passing. And also, the U.S. is getting involved internationally. Instead of being isolated, and Wallowa County is the paragon of isolation, suddenly even it's getting pulled into this nonsense. Labor riots, wars, new technologies, all this sort of stuff is coming down. And it's making people get a little edgy, I think. I guess that's where I see it, Bruce, is that yeah, it's hard to read through it without being like, oh, that seems weird.
So David, statewide, I mean, we didn't have very many blacks in the state.
Nope.
So there was some Asian population, there was a Chinatown in Portland. Were there acts of violence by the KKK against any of these groups, or?
Not the Chinese. No, you don't see anything against the Chinese. Of course, in Oregon, there's the famous 3 lynchings, that occurred, and they were, like one of them, they would hold you up till your feet were just barely touching the ground, and I think 2 of those were in Medford, and one of them was in, escaping me right now. But,
that was Asians?
No, one was Hispanic, one was black, and one was white. One was a bootlegger.
Oh.
One was a bootlegger, and the other one, the Mexican guy was a Mexican, and I think that was the primary issue. And the other one was living immorally with a married woman.
So, wasn't there a law on state books that no black people in Oregon?
Yeah. I mean, in the deep history of Oregon, the contention between slave states and free states. The idea with Oregon was, let's just get out of this whole business and just make it all white. That's going to solve the problem. You don't even have to worry about slave versus non-slave. We're just all white, and white people are not slaves. So that was in the Constitution until relatively recently, or a state constitution until relatively recently. But they didn't really enforce it too much. There never was a giant black population, as you know, in Oregon. but they didn't really enforce it, you know, but it was always there in case they needed it. And it was official law in the Constitution.
Yeah, can you speak to the class makeup of Klan members? Who was
Yeah,
mostly making
Yeah, that's a
up?
really interesting question.
No.
So I think whole dissertations and theses are written on this subject. Who are these people? Were they poor, ignorant hillbillies? Who were they? Who were the people that were attracted to this second resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan? And I think what you see primarily is that they came from kind of the white collar, but in the lower white collar jobs, like say chiropractor. Now, I'm going to offend people. I don't mean to, but dentist, sort of that professional class that's maybe a rung down, accountant. Many of the LeGrand members were railroad employees. And so a lot of those were skilled labor for the railroad. So they were kind of a mix of folks, I think, who probably had some economic precarity between, they're not the bottom, but they can see the bottom, and they're not the top. And the top, it does not have their best interest, and they don't want to go down there. So it looked to me, if someone was poking me, I would kind of lean towards that way, that they were coming from this class that wasn't, they were fairly well off in terms of larger picture, but it was a bit precarious where they were at. And their livelihood could definitely be put into jeopardy by a big influx of immigrants from Europe who were non-English speaking or as a second language and of a different religion and all that. So that was an easy target and an easy worry to put it on, I think. But, yeah.
So what, this is always confused me about the Ku Klux Klan. Why did they have the hoods and the capes? Like, what role did that play, especially when it sounds like some of them you didn't have to, it wasn't required, you know, some were undraped or whatever. Like, why did they do that? Was it for intimidation or like?
Initially, with the first KKK after the Civil War, that was exactly what it was, terror. You come right in, no one knows who you are. But here's the thing, in the South, everybody knew who was under those hoods. They knew. The only people that didn't know, people that were terrorists. That's who they didn't know. So they used that as a tool, but then when they started to reorganize on round two, they said, well, let's keep some of the secrecy, but not all of it. Let's make it a little more family friendly.
Kind of just like KKK.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you weren't required at this time period, you obviously weren't required to wear.
Secrecy was demanded of the members. Yes, secrecy was demanded. Like you couldn't go to a meeting and say what was said unless it was a public meeting. But as you saw, some of them were just taken off their hood. So you could, like James Pointer, the Christian minister, he was openly out KKK. He wasn't hiding it. He was like, KKK.
What was the role of women? I was surprised to see 11 women sign up.
Yeah, and
What was their role?
And what we see in regionally is that the longest surviving Klan activities are with the women's clubs. And we see them in LeGrand and clear up until 1928. They still keep meeting and doing things. And they basically function to do all the things that the women do that the hooded guys don't want to do. You know, that's make the cookies. They organize a lot of that piece of it. Then they have their own separate meetings and the things that they're concerned about. So they also are up to their own programs, primarily with childhood health, childhood education, that sort of thing.
Temperance.
Yes, and temperance. Oh, gosh. Yeah, temperance was a huge thing.
That's,
Why do you think they actually disappeared? Was it the Depression, or does anybody really know? Is there something?
I mean, it was a whole host of things. It was the financial fraud that came out on a state-by-state basis, and it was all kinds of. When you position yourself as a really 100% Americanism and protecting pure womanhood, and then you have some of your members get arrested for rape. So what you saw happening across the country was all these scandals were coming out, and they all started to come out about the same time. And they also had some major losses, like at the Supreme Court with that school bill that got voted down. And if you, like if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. This is the Indiana Klan. At this same time, absolutely incredible story. This guy, the leader of the Indiana Klan, is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But again, what happened was they flipped the whole state. He developed a political machine that was run almost entirely by KKK. They had all kinds of financial fraud going on, and he raped and basically bit a woman to death. He was an unbelievable character. He was a psychopath.
Yeah.
But yeah, really fascinating story.
So David, was there a significant black population in LeGrand due to the railroad?
Yeah, pretty decent sized population of black folk this time in LeGrand.
And how did were there any confrontations there?
You don't see much of it. You don't, unless it's around some of the labor stuff.
Okay.
A little bit of labor stuff, but mostly they stay in their part of LeGrand, the black neighborhood, and not too much trouble. But a lot of times that stuff isn't reported in the paper much. You'll catch whiffs of it here and there, but not so much.
And how about, Peter asked about the temperance movement, but that was very much a part of this thing too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's how they got the women going, because all those drunk men.
And of course the ministers as well. Yeah. It was a huge part of it. Yeah. And then of course the Oregon guy, he got into trouble because he got caught with some initiates in Portland drinking whiskey, as part of their initiation ceremony. So, again, they're holding up really high ideals, but as humans, we often don't hit those very well most of the time. And so, a lot of that contradiction came out.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Right.
The LeGrand deaths.
I have a question just about your general process. You're mentioning these local newspapers, and we're losing our local newspapers. Do you feel like this kind of history is getting captured in a way that somebody can continue to tell these kinds of stories?
I hope so. Of course, the archive that was at the Chieftain Archives has went up to the museum, which is good, and I think that process of digitizing those is a massive job. Mary Ann started, as far as I know, digitizing papers here locally, and so both on the Enterprise Library site, we've got quite a number of digitized newspapers. I use those all the time, and then on our site, Wallowa History site, we've got a pile of digitized newspapers, and so my approach is since I don't know anything, is just to sort of absorb what's being written in those papers sort of week by week, day by day, until it sort of starts to seep into you somehow. Because otherwise, I don't know, trying to get at the flavor of the time or answer a really weighty question like, what were the causes of X? There's lots of causes for all X's, as far as my opinion. Yeah, but I hope that we continue to do that here, but it's a costly, difficult process. But yeah, like I've just mentioned that all the earliest chieftains, in that very early, we worked with U of O to get those digitized and put up on our site, and now you can go to our site and you can read those. And they're just smattering of them. I think there's 21 of those initial papers, say between 1884 and 1899, like maybe 20 odd papers. But we always, are on the lookout for more. And I would hope, some of this time period, some of you had Klan members in your family. Somebody's got some pictures somewhere. But we only, of all that activity here, all those parades, and this is right during the height of photography, someone was taking some pictures. Somebody, somewhere. And so we only have the one known one for Melbourne, which is astounding, that I'm aware of.
So how strong was the temperance movement here?
God, that is such a long, complicated story because, Oregon versus the national, back and forth, over a long time period. And then Joseph votes to go dry, Enterprise votes to go wet.
Okay.
It's a really confusing history to try to suss that out. I think that was at the 19th Amendment, 20th Amendment, passed in 1920s?
There were a lot of stills of all the panties.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But it was a very big part of this movement.
There was an old still in the upstairs at the courthouse when I moved here.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't running. They
They're trying to figure out how to run.
they had captured it somewhere.
Well, thank you all.